stole my heart when you went away. You need to give it back with a string or two attached. Yeah, I know we just met about an hour ago. And then right out of the blue, I wanna spend a lifetime with you. You look alike, you look alike, you look alike flowers on a sunny day. You feel like, you feel like, you feel like raindrops, raindrops. You look alike, you look alike, you look alike flowers on a sunny day. You feel like, you feel like, you feel like raindrops, raindrops. I cross my heart and I hope to die. I'll buy you diamond rings if you want to, even though I hate those things for you. I'll quit my job and I'll sell this guitar to take you traveling. And here's the only song I'll sing. You look alike, you look alike, you look alike flowers on a sunny day. You feel like, you feel like, you feel like raindrops, raindrops. You look alike, you look alike, you look alike flowers on a sunny day. You feel like, you feel like, you feel like raindrops, raindrops. I will never have another just for me. This is where our life ends. So don't bother to trouble your sweet self. No. You look alike, you look alike, you look alike flowers on a sunny day. You feel like, you feel like, you feel like raindrops, raindrops. You look alike, you look alike, you look alike flowers on a sunny day. You feel like, you feel like, you feel like raindrops, raindrops. You look alike, flowers on a sunny day. You look alike, you look alike, flowers on a sunny day.
You're listening to the Jams and Coffee Morning Show with your host, Brad Brock.
Jams and Coffee Monday morning. Really not necessarily a day to celebrate, but perhaps today is going to be the difference, because it's Moon Mission Day, you guys. Moon Mission Day, the Artemis 1, gearing up for a 8:33 a.m. launch. Of course, there is a big fat window between there. There's 8:33 to 10:33, so there's a 2-hour window, and I made the commitment to stick with you today until until blast off, or until the mission gets scrubbed. Whatever happens first, of course. I'd like to thank you for joining me on YouTube or on JNC Radio on the Live365 Radio App. Or if you're over there on Facebook, thanks for tuning in. Come on over to YouTube and join in the fun in the chat rooms there on YouTube. There's a link right where you're watching this video right now that'll bring you over to YouTube. So really, we're just on Facebook to collect you guys to come over to YouTube and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button once you pop over there, and then you're part of the family. I appreciate you joining me this morning. As I mentioned, Monday morning, August 29th, 2022. and it is launch day. This is I'm sporting my NASA cap, my Kennedy Space Center cap, which is where the Artemis 1 is launching from. And let's talk a little bit about the weather, because that's important for launches. Here on the Treasure Goes, the wake-up temps on Monday will start around the upper 70s to near 80 degrees at the coast. And, of course, that late August heat continues with high humidity, lots of tropical moisture, and a light steering flow. Although a widespread heavy rain is not expected, some slow-moving showers and storms could cause some local street flooding in a few spots. Moving forward through the week, on Tuesday and Wednesday, some drier air will cause the rain chances to come down a bit, heading into the midweek. In the tropics, there are 4 spots that we're keeping an eye on, but none of them is an immediate threat to land for the next 5 days. And there are no imminent threats to Florida or the U.S. altogether through the upcoming week, but things are definitely becoming more active out there. Am I right, Paul? The weather actually looks good for the Artemis 1 moon mission launch, says NASA. It looks like Mother Nature may cooperate for this historic Artemis 1 mega rocket launch to the moon today. The weather outlook has improved for the planned Artemis 1 launch at 8:33 a.m., as I mentioned. Of course, that's Eastern time if you're watching on the other side of the country. Super early. And it's launching from Pad 39B at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Forecasters are predicting a promising 80% chance of good liftoff conditions, up from 70% yesterday. Melody Lovin, the weather officer with the U.S. Space Force's Space Launch 45 group, said the best weather for Artemis 1 is at the start of its 2-hour window. As the morning wears on, there's a higher chance of rainy weather, she said in a NASA briefing. By the window's end at 10:33, the chances of good weather drop to 60%. So it's looking good, you guys, for a nice early launch today. Nice early launch. So today we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about moon missions, and we'll talk a little bit about this mission as well. I am currently streaming the live stream from NASA. So I'll keep that up on the screen as well. So while you're watching this show, you can also watch what's going on for NASA. And, of course, we'll cut over to it if any big things start going. And I'll blow up that screen there for you to see it. That way you can stick with me, and I can narrate, and we can have some fun together here in the chat room. Thank you, Paul and Philip and Pam, for tuning in first thing early in the morning. You guys always keeping me company out there. And to any of you that I'm missing, as I haven't been over to Facebook yet to check those comments. But while we're getting warmed up here, we do have some national days. We'll talk about those real quick. Interesting ones today. It is National Lemon Juice Day. It's an important day, I think. You know, when the sun is blazing high in the sky, National Lemon Juice Day comes along just in time to bring a refreshing squeeze to just about anything. On August 29th, you celebrate a tart drop of lemon juice in your cooking, beverages, or freshen up the world around you. These brightly colored sour fruits originated in the Himalayan mountains millions of years ago. Did you know that? However, they have evolved since then and today the citrus fruit is grown commercially in temperate climates. In the United States, California, and Arizona produce more lemons than any other state. How about that? And it makes lemonade. When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Am I right? It's also according to Hoyle Day. It encourages individuals to honor the rules and regulations in particular situations. It's also a day to pay tribute to a man by the name of Edmund Hoyle, an Englishman who was thought to be the first technical writer on card games. There you go. The reason we can call a cheater is because of Edmund Hoyle. And finally, it's National Chop Suey Day. Well, if you weren't hungry yet, you're probably hungry now. Get your chopsticks ready because National Chop Suey Day recognizes this American Chinese culinary cuisine each year on August 29th. Chop suey, which means assorted pieces. As a dish in American Chinese cuisine, the main ingredients include meat, whether it be chicken, fish, beef, prawns, or pork, and eggs. As the meat cooks over high heat, add vegetables, usually bean sprouts, cabbage, and celery. And this dish is bound in a starch-thickened sauce. Typically, rice accompanies the flavorful dish as well. According to food historian Alan Davidson, chop suey is a prime example of culinary mythology. These food myths happen with popular foods. How about that? Those are your national days today. How fun, how fun. My weekend was pretty good. Relatively normal in terms of weekends for old Brad. With the exception of, as we mentioned Thursday night, my show got rained out at Chuck's. I was really disappointed about that. And Friday wasn't looking so good as well. Or that was Friday, rather. Thursday and Friday got rained out. So, yeah, I was not too happy. I thought Saturday was going to be a wash as well. But I made it to the farmer's market in Vero Beach for an 8 a.m. start. And I really thought that my show at Collab Kitchen in Stewart was going to be canceled as well. But the weather cleared up. And it ended up being a beautiful evening there at Collab. I love that spot. If you've not been to Collab Kitchen in downtown Stewart, it's a great spot. The food is amazing. They have their smoker out in the back where you could just smell the wonderful smoking that's going on. And it makes you so much more hungry than when you walked in the joint. They have a beautiful bar. It's really, really nice. And they have this huge backyard type area where you could let your kids run. They got some toys and things out there. And it's completely AstroTurf lawn out there. So you don't have to worry about ants or any of that kind of stuff going on. Really, really a cool spot. I always have a great time performing there. So check it out. Collab Kitchen in Stewart. And then yesterday, I performed at Sailfish Brewing, one of my favorite spots. Great spot to have a beer. The weather was bad there, but I was inside in the tap room and had a really, really nice time. I love them there at Sailfish Brewing. And that was it. Then I was anticipating Jordan to come home from her trip to Chicago with her sister to visit her brother. And so I went down to Thirsty Turtle. I had some wings. I went home. I cleaned up the house and waited for her to arrive. Half asleep, but she did. And I still managed to get up and be here this morning with all of you. So she's still sleeping. She said that it's possible that she might come out and join at some point this morning, but we'll see. She's sleeping like a princess in the room there, so won't hold my breath. So listen, you guys, we're gonna talk about this launch as we are ticking down about 20 or so minutes out from the launch time. And we're going to talk a little bit about Artemis 1. This is the gigantic Artemis Mega Moon rocket. It's the most powerful space rocket ever built. And it's gearing up to blast off to the moon. The Artemis 1 mission will launch today on an uncrewed test flight, the spacecraft powering NASA's Artemis Moon program, which will eventually send humans back to our nearest natural satellite, and then hopefully from there to Mars. So here's the plan for the launch. And you can watch it right here on Jams and Coffee. So the $20 billion Artemis rocket, which is composed of the 30-story Space Launch System, SLS, and the Orion capsule, is scheduled to take off from Launch Pad 39B at NASA's Kennedy Space Center here in Florida sometime between 8:33 and 10:33 Eastern Time. After it launches, the spacecraft's boosters, which are capable of 8.8 million pounds of thrust, will fall away, and the Orion module will zip 40,000 miles beyond the moon before returning to Earth on October 10th. The NASA representatives wrote on the Artemis mission webpage, "We will collaborate with commercial and international partners to establish the first long-term presence on the moon. Then we will use what we learn on and around the moon to take the next giant leap, sending the first astronauts to Mars." The Artemis 1 test flight will enable NASA scientists to make vital observations and tweaks before Artemis 2 makes the same journey with a human crew in 2024. Then in 2025, the Artemis 3 mission will see the first woman and the first person of color to land on the moon. These missions will be vital dress rehearsals for NASA's greatest ambition for the Artemis spacecraft, and that's, of course, taking humans to Mars. The SLS is the largest NASA rocket since the Apollo program's Saturn V rocket and is made up of a liquid hydrogen and oxygen core booster with two smaller rocket boosters attached to its sides. For the Artemis 1 flight, the rocket will send the Orion capsule on a 6-day, 69-mile-high flyby of the moon's surface, during which NASA engineers will gather data on the module's trajectory and the effects of low gravity on 3 mannequins on board. Then, upon its dramatic return through Earth's atmosphere at 32 times the speed of sound, mind you, NASA will put the capsule's ablative heat shield to the test. The extreme air friction and its parachute should safely slow the spacecraft to just 20 miles per hour, after which it will plop down off the coast of Baja California, Mexico, in the Pacific Ocean. How about that? So there was a little snafu that happened this morning, of course, and they are currently pressing towards the launch, which, of course, is the first crew capsule that will orbit the moon for the first time in 50 years. And that comes after a leak reappeared in the same place that saw seepage during a dress rehearsal back in the spring. As precious minutes in the countdown ticked away Monday, the launch controllers repeatedly halted the fueling operation. It's already running nearly an hour late because of thunderstorms offshore of Florida's Kennedy Space Center. And NASA's assistant launch director and controllers finally managed to get the leak down to a safe and acceptable level. And it's held steady there as nearly 1 million gallons of super cold fuel filled the tanks of the rocket's core stage. So here we are. You can see the image there. Blow it up a little bit. And she looks ready to rock and roll there. And, it's currently 8:15 here on the East Coast, which means about 17 minutes before the scheduled launch. Are you guys as excited as me? I'm stoked. I love this kind of stuff. So while we're doing that, well, why don't we talk a little bit about how this all began with the Apollo 11 mission. That, of course, way back in 1969. The primary objective of Apollo 11 was to complete a national goal set by JFK, and that's to perform a crewed lunar landing and a return to Earth. Additional flight objectives included scientific exploration by the lunar module, crew, of course, deployment of a television camera to transmit signals to Earth, and deployment of a solar wind composition experiment, seismic experiment package, and a laser-ranging retroreflector. During the exploration, the two astronauts were to gather samples of lunar surface materials for return to Earth. They also were to extensively photograph the lunar terrain. The deployed scientific equipment, the lunar module spacecraft, and each other, both with still and motion picture cameras. This was to be the last Apollo mission to fly a free return trajectory, which would enable a return to Earth with no engine firing, providing a ready aboard of the mission anytime at any time prior to lunar orbit insertion. Right, Philip? Philip says he thinks it's cool to see a rocket like this again. I agree. You know, NASA, it's been a tumultuous time for these types of things. And the truth is, like, the question that you ask yourself is, why did we stop going to the moon in the first place? Well, I'm going to tell you. It wasn't an understatement when Neil Armstrong said he took a giant leap for mankind when he took his first step on the moon. During the Apollo program, 6 crewed missions landed on the moon, with the 7th, of course, Apollo 13, famously making an emergency return to Earth without landing. And on those missions, 12 astronauts conducted an array of increasingly sophisticated studies of the moon, yielding new scientific insight into the evolution of our celestial neighbor. And each mission explored new areas of the lunar surface and left behind nuclear-powered scientific equipment that continued to send data back to Earth years after the last astronaut left the moon. However, the Apollo program ended in December 1972 with Apollo 17. So why did we stop? For many citizens, beating the Soviet Union to the moon ended the space race. Public support for expensive programs of human space exploration were never very high, and they declined considerably. Enthusiasm was further eroded by the expense of the Vietnam War, the serious problems in the cities, and a growing sense of environmental crisis. That disappointed space advocates who expected that Apollo would be the beginning of an era in which humans would move out into space to bases on the moon, space stations in Earth orbit, and landing on Mars. Nevertheless, this overall shift to diminished support in public and political sentiment resulted in a modest program of post-Apollo human space activity. 2 programs using leftover Apollo rockets and spacecraft symbolized this new era: Skylab and the Apollo-Soyuz test project. Now, Skylab, of course, an experimental habitat built from the 3rd stage of a Saturn V, was the first American space station. It was only intended as a temporary home in space. The longest mission, which ended in February 1974, lasted almost 3 months. Skylab was occupied by astronauts 3 times over 1973 and 1974, and each time by a crew of 3 astronauts. The Apollo-Soyuz test project marked a real and symbolic end to Apollo and the space race of the 1960s. To highlight reduced international tensions the U.S. and the Soviet Union undertook, after years of intense rivalry, their first cooperative mission in space. In July 1975, an American and a Soviet spacecraft rendezvoused in space as a symbol of the 2 countries' improved relations. The crews visited each other's spacecrafts, shared meals, and worked on various tasks during several days together in space. And now, after over 50 years, Americans are again preparing to send astronauts to the moon, which is very exciting stuff. Philip said, but when Michael Jackson moonwalked, it was all over, it was all over with NASA. I mean, how could they top that, huh? And it just so happens today, Philip, it is Michael Jackson's birthday. Wouldn't you know, he would have been 64 years old. And unfortunately, he passed away at only 50 some years ago. The King of Pop, who became the most successful singer in American history for releasing award-winning hits like Billie Jean, Beat It, They Don't Care About Us, and Smooth Criminal, would have been 64 years old today. Sad. Sad and interesting life of Michael Jackson. But interesting you brought that up. It is his birthday today. I'm going to take you back to Apollo 11, the very first manned moon mission. Of course, launched from Cape Kennedy on July 16th, 1969, carrying Commander Neil Armstrong, Command Module Pilot Michael Collins, and Lunar Module Pilot Edwin Buzz Aldrin into an initial Earth orbit of 114 by 116 miles. An estimated 650 million people watched Armstrong's televised image and heard his voice describe the event as he took one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind on July 20th, 1969. 2 hours, 44 minutes, and 1.5 revolutions after launch, the SIVB stage ignited for a second burn of 5 minutes, 48 seconds, placing Apollo 11 into trans-lunar orbit. The Command and Service Module, or CSM, Columbia, separated from the stage, which included the spacecraft's lunar module adapter containing the lunar module, Eagle. After transposition and jettisoning of the SLA panels on the SIVB stage, the Command and Service Module docked with the lunar module, and the SIVB stage separated and injected into heliocentric orbit 4 hours and 40 minutes into the flight. The first color television transmission to Earth from Apollo 11 occurred during the translunar coast of the Control and Service Module / lunar modules. Later, on July 17th, a 3-second burn of the SPS was made to perform the second of 4 scheduled mid-course corrections programmed for the flight. The launch had been so successful that the other 3 were not needed. Talk about everything going right as opposed to other lunar missions. On July 18th, 1969, Armstrong and Aldrin put on their spacesuits and climbed through the docking tunnel from Columbia to Eagle to check out the lunar module and to make the second TV transmission. On July 19th, after Apollo 11 had flown behind the moon at contact with Earth, came the first lunar orbit insertion maneuver. About 75 hours, 50 minutes into flight, a retrograde firing of the SPS for 357.5 seconds placed the spacecraft into initial elliptical lunar orbit of 69 by 190 miles. Later, a second burn for 17 seconds placed the docked vehicles into lunar orbit. On July 20th, Armstrong and Aldrin entered the lunar module again, made a final check, and at 100 hours, 12 minutes into the flight, the Eagle undocked and separated from Columbia for visual inspection. At 101 hours, 36 minutes, when the lunar module was behind the moon on its 13th orbit, its descent engine fired for 30 seconds to provide retrograde thrust and commenced descent orbit insertion, changing to an orbit of 9 by 67 miles on a trajectory that was virtually identical to that flown by Apollo 10. And 102 hours, 33 minutes after Columbia and Eagle had reappeared from behind the moon, and when lunar module was about 300 miles uprange, powered descent initiation was performed, with the descent engine firing for 756.3 seconds. After 8 minutes, the lunar module was at high gate. That's about 26,000 feet above the surface and about 5 miles from the landing site. The descent engine continued to provide braking thrust till about 102 hours, 45 minutes into the mission. Partially piloted manually by Armstrong, the Eagle landed in the Sea of Tranquility in Site 2 at 0 degrees, 41 minutes, 15 seconds north latitude and 23 degrees, 26 minutes east longitude. This was about 4 miles downrange for the predicted touchdown point and occurred almost 1.5 minutes earlier than scheduled. Included a power descent that ran a mere nominal 40 seconds longer than the pre-flight planning due to translation maneuvers to avoid a crater during the final phase of landing. Attached to the descent stage was a commemorative plaque signed by President Richard Nixon and the 3 astronauts. Armstrong and Aldrin spent 21 hours, 36 minutes on the moon's surface. After a rest period that included 7 hours of sleep, the ascent stage engine fired at 124 hours, 22 minutes. And, of course, made their way safely back to Earth. Re-entry procedures were initiated on the 24th of July, 44 hours after leaving lunar orbit. service module separated from the control module, which was reoriented to a heat shield forward position. Parachute deployment occurred at 195 hours, 13 minutes, after a flight of 195 hours, 18 minutes, 35 seconds. About 36 minutes longer than planned, Apollo 11 splashed down in the Pacific Ocean, 13 miles from the recovery ship USS Hornet. Because of bad weather in the target area, the landing point was changed by about 250 miles. Apollo 11 landed 13 degrees, 19 minutes north latitude, and 169 degrees, 9 minutes west longitude, on July 24th, 1969. How about that? Now, for this particular launch, which is happening in moments, if all goes according to plan. Hey, welcome to the show, Derek. There are 4 nail-biter moments that we should be looking out for here in this particular launch. So assessing the durability and functionality of the spacecraft itself is the other crucial objective for Artemis 1. The first of those events, there are some high-energy events, 4 key high-energy events. And the first of these events is the SLS launch, when the 322-foot-tall rocket's 4 massive RS-25 engines finally ignite, shooting the rocket off of the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center and upward on an 8-minute climb through Earth's atmosphere. Should liftoff succeed as planned, the second high-energy event occurs about 2 minutes later when the SLS's 2 solid rocket boosters detach from the main rocket stage and parachute down to the ocean. They say that's always a nail-biter because you have these large moving bodies as they have to come up and separate and clear. Now, while numerous NASA launches have successfully completed this procedure, it's still a tricky maneuver to do. The third big event is the translunar injection, a critical maneuver that lasts about 20 minutes, wherein the now booster-free spacecraft fires a small RL-10 engine to push entirely out of Earth's orbit and set off on a trajectory to the moon. 5 days later, the Orion spacecraft will be on the moon's doorstep, orbiting within about 62 miles of the lunar surface. After several weeks of orbiting the moon, taking pictures, and running tests on various spacecraft equipment, the Orion capsule will return to Earth. This sets in motion the final high-energy event, the fiery fall through Earth's atmosphere, during which the spacecraft will endure temperatures of about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about half as hot as the surface of the sun. Woo! That is hot. Orion's going to come screaming down at 11 kilometers a second. That's where they're going to test Orion's heat shield. And finally, the capsule will deploy parachutes and splash down into the Pacific Ocean off of Baja, California, Mexico. How the spacecraft fares through these high-energy events will tell NASA whether the Artemis program is ready to proceed in its second phase. The Artemis 2, currently planned for 2024, the crew of real human astronauts will repeat the journey around the moon that their mannequin colleagues, they like to call them moonikins, embarked during this mission. So we are getting pretty close here, you guys. Getting pretty close. Going to refresh this image here. See if we can't get a better feed. There we go. I'm going to see if they're saying anything. We're going to tune in, see if they're saying anything. I don't hear anything. Doesn't sound like they're saying anything yet, but we are approaching launch time for the Artemis first. At least the beginning of the window here. Looks a little windy out there. The camera's shaking a little bit. That's okay. I'm going to do a little research here. So I'll take a little musical break. The view will still be on there. Actually, we'll wait until at least the window clears here. I'd hate to go to a musical break and then boom, blast off. So we're going to keep zoomed in here on... I'm going to keep zoomed here on the rocket. And I'm going to do a little research. I'm going to find out where we're at here on the launch. See how we're doing. We'll keep see if we can find something a little bit more recent here. We have approached the 8:33, the opening of the launch window here. You're watching Jams and Coffee on YouTube or listening on the Live365 app. No launch yet. Haven't seen a countdown yet, or a final countdown. So it hasn't quite begun. Don't like all those clouds out there. That looks a little ominous, doesn't it? If you're watching on Facebook, which I've neglected here, I'm going to pop over and see if anybody's watching there. We encourage you to come over to YouTube. I'm definitely watching those comments. Not that I don't love you on Facebook, but come over to YouTube. The link is right there in the description of this video that you're watching. Come over to our YouTube channel and watch over there. You can interact with the people in the chats, and I can see your comments more quickly. But we are waiting for the countdown here. Waiting for the countdown here for the Artemis 1 rocket. Take the Orion capsule around the moon. I see Philip said he was multitasking over on Facebook. All right. I'm going to see if... Still no audio from this feed yet. Once they start talking, I might switch over there and just let you guys listen to what they have to say. So I'm keeping an eye on it.
This is Artemis Launch Control with an update. Launch Director Charlie Blackwell Thompson has called a scrub for today. Again, Launch Director Charlie Blackwell Thompson has called a scrub of the attempt of launch of Artemis 1 and the Space Launch System with the Orion spacecraft. The issue that came up was an engine bleed that couldn't be remedied, but the rocket is currently in a stable configuration. It was mostly tanked, but not completely tanked. Engineers are now working on a plan to continue gathering data about this particular engine and the bleed that didn't work out. The rocket, the hydrogen bleed, rather, was a goal of the previous wet dress rehearsal that didn't happen due to a hydrogen leak. So engineers are focused on gathering as much data as they can at this time. So they have not gone to draining the rocket just yet. They're going to keep it in its current configuration and gather that data. To summarize, we held at T-minus 40 minutes and counting after the team was unable to get past engine bleed that didn't show the right temperature once they got into the engine bleed test. and ultimately the launch director has called a scrub for the day. The earliest opportunity, depending on what happens with this engine bleed, would be September 2nd. That is available to the launch team. However, we will await a determination of what the plan is to go forward to remedy the engine bleed and then go from there. Again, an availability to launch. The next availability to launch is 12:48 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, September 2nd. But we must wait to see what shakes out from their test data that they're currently gathering now, and the decision that's made by the launch team about where to go from here. We appreciate you watching NASA TV and our coverage of the Artemis 1 launch attempt. This is Daryl Nail with NASA Communications signing off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Thank you.
All right, well, you heard it there, folks. You heard it there. The launch has been scrubbed, but listen, it's important to note that these things happen, you know, and the more data that they collect, the less possibility of tragedy occurring to live human astronauts that are on these rockets. It's unbelievable the amount of thrust that occurs beneath these people, you know, as we tragedies such as the Challenger spacecraft. We really don't want to revisit or relive those types of things. So while this was an unfortunate, you know, you kind of you can't really change the weather, you know. So those kinds of scrubs are you know, kind of the X factor, if you will. Those are the kind of the variables in these situations. But unfortunately, this was a mechanical issue that they're going to have to work through and figure out. I reported earlier that there was that they had seemed to have gotten it under control. However, that it seems that somebody was not happy with those results, and that scrubbing the mission for today might be the best course of action. As mentioned there, September 2nd, just after noon, is the next available launch day for them. Whether they go for it or not, whether they've addressed the problem and repaired it, is, you know, it remains to be seen. But they said that September 2nd is the next available. What day is that? What day is September 2nd? Oh, it's a Friday. It's this Friday. All right. Well, if it's on again, we'll do this all over again, and it will certainly cover it. Well, I guess I'll be off the air, but maybe I'll get back on and do this again. That could be fun. But yeah, what a shame. What a shame. Unfortunately, the launch has been scrubbed for the Artemis 1 mega rocket. Philip said Major Tom would have taken off. He ain't scared. Probably true. Probably true there, Philip. Well, since we were talking about it, you guys, we...
You're listening to the Jams and Coffee Morning Show.
You sure are. Thank you, Jessica. Well, unfortunately, as I said, that has been scrubbed, so I'm going to take a quick musical break. We'll come back with some celebrity birthdays, my top 10 list, and then probably some shameless plugs that might get you on with your day. Thank you so much for tuning in on YouTube and JNC Radio and Facebook. I'm happy with you guys over on Facebook. I don't like Facebook, but I love you, so that helps as well. All right, first song, this is from the Tom Jackson Band. We'll be right back.
some barbed wire, little muck in a mire, and a rusty old beat-up truck. Holla, yeehaw, pop on, stack a bonfire, light it up. Twang a banjo, rising up that boat. Listen to them both sing, that's where you'll find me. Knee deep in country. Down a muddy river along the Mississippi, in the middle of the big cornfields, in the backwoods where the hunting is good and life gets real. Brewing up a batch of musky dime wine with the blacktop and Duro meat, that's where you find me. Knee deep in country. Sipping granny sweet tea on a hot summer day, and that lazy dog laying in the shade with them old men telling them jokes, laughing about the same old thing. That screen porch door squeaking back and forth, and kids on a tire swing, that's where you'll find me. Knee deep in country. Down a muddy river along the Mississippi, in the middle of the big cornfields, in the backwoods where the hunting is good and life gets real. Brewing up a batch of musky dime wine with a blacktop and Duro meat, that's where you'll find me. Knee deep in country. In the backwoods where the hunting is good and life gets real. Brewing up a batch of musky dime wine with a blacktop and Duro meat, that's where you'll find me. Knee deep in country, that's where you'll find me. Knee deep in country. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Welcome back to Jams and Coffee in the Morning. That was Tom Jackson, Knee Deep in Country, good buddy of mine. Thank you for tuning in here on YouTube and Facebook and JNC Radio on the Live365 app. Appreciate you tuning in this morning. Of course, as I mentioned, the Artemis 1 launch was scrubbed, so that really impacts all that I had prepared for you here on the show today. But we did mention that today was Michael Jackson's birthday. He would have been 64 years old, but he passed away at 50. 14 years ago. It's hard to believe, isn't it? Also having a birthday today, another astronaut. Chris Hadfield, turning 63 years old, a Canadian Air Force commander who became the first Canadian in history to walk in space. Gained a fan base on social media when he posted pictures aboard the space station of the Earth. How about that? Chris Hadfield celebrating a birthday on what would have been a historic rocket launch. Turning 47, this is an unbelievable one to me. Turning 47 years old today, Dante Basco, a Filipino actor and rapper best known for voicing Zuko in the Nickelodeon series Avatar: The Last Airbender. But he also co-starred in the film Hook, alongside Robin Williams, playing, of course, the role of Rufio. Those of you might remember him from that film. And turning 51 years old today, the actress who played Michael J. Fox's on-screen girlfriend on Spin City, and also portrayed Amanda Daniels on the HBO series Entourage, Carla Gugino, turning 51. In 2018, she began starring in the Netflix original The Haunting of Hill House. I watched those. They were spooky. They were spooky. Her film credits include American Gangster, San Andreas, Watchmen, Sin City, and Night at the Museum. Happy birthday, everybody. Oh, Philip caught me. Philip caught me without the audio. Yeah, I have several buttons that do the same thing. And if I don't push the right one, I hear myself. It sounds like I'm having a great time. But it's not going out to you until I look down and see either your comments or I see the audio LED not spiking. Yeah, so we're going to do, I guess, just dive right into our top 10 list here. This was a good one. I saw this and it made me crack up. So without further ado, this is the JNC Top 10. Here we go. All right, the JNC Top 10 list for today. Let me get it. I didn't have it queued up. I told you that I was unprepared for failure. But that's okay. Because you all are very understanding people, and I love and adore you for that. Now, as the title of one book famously proclaimed, everybody poops. That's right, Philip. We're talking about poop again. That truism is really remarkable to think about. There is one experience shared by every person on Earth, and most people would rather dismiss or ignore it. Well, that is unfair. Few trips to the bathroom were literal pit stops in history. Following list is 10 of the most consequential things to ever happen on the toilet. It does not take much to redirect the flow of history. Oh, sometimes all it needs is a flush. There we go. This is the top 10 bathroom breaks that changed history. Number 10 on this list. Even more than most presidents, Lyndon B. Johnson had a fairly mixed legacy. He's responsible for both groundbreaking domestic achievements like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Acts of 1965, and foreign fiascos like escalating the Vietnam War. Whether Johnson reshaped American society for better or worse is up for debate. But he almost didn't do anything at all. On June 9th, 1942, Johnson was just a young sailor in the Naval Reserve deployed on a bombing mission. He was initially assigned to fly on the B-26 Marauder, the Wabash Cannonball. Moments before takeoff, Johnson departed the plane to, you guessed it, visit the toilet. When he came back, Lieutenant Colonel Francis R. Stevens had taken his seat instead. Johnson was forced to board the next aircraft in line, another B-26, the Heckling Hare. Well, it was a lucky break. The Heckling Hare saw limited combat and shortly after abandoned its mission. The Wabash Cannonball was not as lucky. He was shot down by Japanese forces, killing everyone on board. Johnson's full bladder saved his life. Number 9 on this list. Still hanging out in the 60s here. 1968, Douglas Engelbart foresaw a new world. One of the first visionaries of the digital future, Engelbart imagined much of what would become the basics of modern computing, everything from graphic apps and video conferencing to word processing and linking files. However, he had a little help envisioning these new realities. A little thing called LSD. That's right, like many fellow Californians at the time, Engelbart was an enthusiastic advocate for the mind-expanding benefits of LSD. As the head of the Augmented Human Intellect Research Center at the Stanford Research Institute, he and his team took acid for inspiration. Likely story. Engelbart was initially doubtful that any contraption he conceived while on the drug would have any use once he was no longer under the influence. But he was finally convinced of the drug's possibilities when he came up with the Tinkle toy. It's a miniature water wheel installed on the side of a toilet that would spin when peed on. to be a fun and practical tool to help potty train young children. Now assured of LSD's potential, he regularly took the drug while working. In these sessions, he conceived much of what would become the computer, even if he did not actually invent it. He did make one tangible breakthrough, though, a small, strange, rounded controller on the end of a wire that could move items on the screen. And he called it a mouse. No wire on this one, though. A mouse. Thank goodness. What would we do without it? All right, number 8 on the list. Millions of lives have been shaped by pure luck. And in 1899, Dr. Oscar Minkowski accidentally bumped into his colleague, Josef von Mering, in the university library. The conversation naturally turned to the classic icebreaker, pancreases. Now, the two got into a friendly debate about if someone could theoretically survive with their pancreas removed. To find out, the two staged a little bet. Later that afternoon, Minkowski removed his dog's pancreas. The dog was perfectly healthy. Minkowski had won the bet and beat his friend. The experiment was over, and that was until he noticed one curious side effect. While cleaning the dog's kennel, Minkowski noticed an inordinate number of flies flocking to his dog's pee. While most people would have just dismissed that observation as flies being gross, Minkowski started investigating. He discovered that the urine was now full of sugar, a clear sign that the dog was diabetic. Because the dog had no signs of diabetes before its pancreas was removed, Minkowski hypothesized that the organ must have some role in metabolizing sugar. And that's wrong. It's not an organ. The pancreas, in fact, is a gland. Write that down. Write that down, whoever wrote this article. It took a while, but other scientists eventually figured out how the pancreas secretes insulin. Because of Minkowski's medical breakthrough, diabetes went from a death sentence to a treatable disease. And some victories really are that sweet. Number 7 on the list here today. The goal of all 17th century alchemists was to discover the Philosopher's Stone, an impossibly elusive elixir capable of turning base metals into gold and granting immortality. With powers like that, it's pretty understandable how someone could take extreme measures to find it. Even then, Henning Brand probably took things a bit too far. Starting in 1669, Brand collected more than 1,500 gallons of urine from his neighbors and friends. He baked and boiled the urine until the residue was all that was left. The experiment followed a certain kind of perverse logic. Water, he presupposed, is the basis of life. Therefore, the cure for a longer life would be found in water, right? Makes sense. That water passed through a person, it would have even more of a mystical connection to life. Put that all together, and it's not that absurd to think that the Philosopher's Stone might be lying among kidney stones. Now, while he never found gold in his golden treasure, he did find something arguably more valuable. The final distilled product was a white powder that glowed in the dark. Named for the Latin for light bearer, Brand dubbed his discovery phosphorus. Phosphorus is, of course, a bedrock of modern life. Industries from fertilizer to steel production rely on phosphorus to exist. So next time you go to the restroom, feel free to light a match. Something only possible because Henning Brand did the same thing all those years before. Number 6. By 1937, the tension between Japan and China had reached a breaking point. A series of escalating military maneuvers over the past decade pushed the two nations to the brink of conflict. Every time before, cooler heads prevailed and soldiers retreated before things spiraled into all-out war. But that was until the Marco Polo Bridge incident. On July 7, 1937, Japanese troops gathered around the city of Wanping in a clear antagonistic display. During the exercise, a private of the Japanese Imperial Army, Shimura Kikujiro, broke ranks to relieve himself. Because there was no appropriate facilities nearby, he ducked into the woods. Once finished, he tried to rejoin his unit, but they had already left. Lost in the darkness, it took him a while to find his way back to base. He didn't know it, but his bowel had started a movement. In the meantime, Kikujiro's absence caused the army to panic. Japanese officers dispatched troops to Wanping to find their missing soldier. When the Chinese refused to let the Japanese enter Wanping, a small Japanese infantry tried to breach the city's walls. They were successfully repelled. 45 minutes later, a larger group tried to siege again and fired the first shots of the Second Sino-Japanese War. The Japanese had the excuse they had been looking for. The minor skirmish became the pretext for a full-scale invasion of China. The resulting conflict was the largest Asian war of the 20th century. By the time of Japan's surrender in September 1945, the war had claimed the lives of more than 33 million soldiers and civilians. So how about that for a pee break? Number 5 on the list, King George II was not a particularly popular ruler, but he got things done. His reign from 1727 to 1760 was marked by firm leadership in foreign policy and military appointments. On domestic issues, he acquiesced most power to Parliament. He was too busy gorging himself in his castle. As far as last meals go, it's hard to beat hot chocolate. On October 25th, 1760, the king finished a nice cup of hot chocolate and retired to his chambers. Moments later, his body was discovered slumped over the toilet. He had so strained himself that he caused an aortic aneurysm. Oh, sad. While the doctor on scene could not save the king, he did help save many others. The doctor's extensive notes on the king's condition contain the first known description of a aortic dissection. With those findings, other doctors had the knowledge to diagnose a secret killer before it was too late. Today, thousands are saved from something that is silent but no longer deadly. His death had other unintended consequences. Logically, King George II was succeeded by King George III, an infamous reign marked by moments of erratic behavior and insanity. To treat his condition, doctors tortured the king with a series of painful and unnecessary experiments. Burdened by personal problems, George III delegated much of his responsibilities to Parliament. Without guidance from the king, Parliament enacted strict taxes on their colonies in North America. Perhaps a more present and invested leader would have asserted more control over Parliament, or taken the leadership to quell the insurrection forces in the American colonies before it escalated into a war. It's impossible to know how George II would have handled the crisis, but the distracted King George III failed to respond as the gears of a revolution were set in motion. America. Number 4 on our list, during World War I, the brilliant mathematician and physicist William Lawrence Bragg was stationed in France. He thought he could better serve the war effort with his intelligence rather than fighting. As great as his brain was, his most important inspiration came from a different place, wouldn't you know? In 1915, Bragg visited an outhouse in a field. The room was completely closed off from the outside world except for a pipe that ran under the toilet. While Bragg was using the toilet, a British 6-inch gun 1,000 feet away fired a round. The energy traveled through the air until it shot up the pipe. A puff of energy lifted Bragg's bare bottom off the seat. Surprised that something was coming up from the drain instead, Bragg tried to track down the source of the energy. He soon realized that the pressure was caused by the gun's low-frequency infrasound. If these unique frequencies could be traced back to their source, Bragg could locate the enemy artillery. He created a small, empty wooden ammunition box with a thin platinum wire that could detect infrasound. With this device, the Allies could pinpoint enemy weapons within 150 feet. The new technology was a crucial development that helped turn the tide of the war, securing victory 4 years later. How about that? Number 3, on February 12, 1946, 26-year-old African-American veteran Sergeant Isaac Woodard returned to the U.S. from fighting abroad in World War II. He boarded a Greyhound bus towards his home in Winnsboro, South Carolina. Along the route, he asked the bus driver if he could pull into a rest stop. Furious over having to make the stop, the bus driver called the police on Woodward. The police forcibly removed him from the bus In custody, they beat him unconscious and gouged out his eyes. Denied medical care for 3 days, Woodard was left permanently blind. Such brazen police brutality was a political awakening for President Truman. Spurred by Woodard's blinding, Truman created a Presidential Commission on Civil Rights. Per its recommendation, he issued Executive Order 9981, the order that formally desegregated the U.S. military in 1948. Another federal official was similarly moved by the injustice against Woodard. Judge Julius Waring, the judge presiding over the case against the police officers, was outraged when they were acquitted of all charges. He dedicated the rest of his life as a fierce advocate for civil rights. His judicial decisions played a key role in dismantling school segregation. His dissent in Briggs versus Elliott was the first federal case to argue that segregation violated the 14th Amendment. The NAACP's defense lawyer, the future U.S. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, lost the case. Waring was the one who encouraged him to appeal the decision. That appeal ultimately culminated in the landmark Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Board of Education, and segregation was officially unconstitutional. All for a bathroom stop. Yes, that's right, Philip. Pay attention, there will be a quiz after the show. In 1946, 13-year-old Charlie Wilson could not get control of his dog. The little mutt kept straying into his neighbor's flower bed. Eventually, the neighbor had enough. Because the dog could not stop peeing, he would have to stop breathing, and the neighbor buried some shards of glass into the dog's food bowl. What an asshole. Wilson vowed to avenge his dog's death. His first method of payback was burning down the flowers. Burning down the flowers, would only sting for a little bit, so he had to stick it to him where it really hurt. The neighbor was a Texas councilman named Charles Hazard, who was up for re-election. Wilson organized a campaign to oust the dog murderer. He went door to door telling people about what happened to his dog and asking them to vote against Hazard. In total, he swayed 95 voters, or nearly 25% of the total electorate. As a result, Hazard lost his re-election bid by more than 16 votes. Gloating at Hazard's loss, Wilson went to his house and told him he shouldn't poison any more dogs. The personal victory inspired Wilson to spend his life in politics. He eventually climbed all the way up to become a congressional representative. In that role, he spearheaded America's covert operations in the Soviet-Afghan War. He funneled funds and training for the Afghan Mujahideen. While the Afghanistan forces helped America score a decisive victory in the short run, the sect soon broke off into splinter groups, including the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. After the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, that victory soured, and a new age of terrorism had begun. Interesting. That's a story I didn't know. Fact check that one. And number one, the bathroom break that made life possible. Unlike all the other entries on the list, this last one is not about any particular trip to the toilet. Instead, this one focuses on an uncoordinated series of millions of participants stretched over eons. The only thing that connects them is that they really needed to go. Although, to be fair, there wasn't much else going on. Most of the Earth's history is nothing. For 3 billion years, simple primordial organisms littered the planet. They ate, pooped, and made more cells, and that was it. Then suddenly, there was life. During the Cambrian explosion, clumps of single-celled bacteria rapidly evolved into complex life with nervous systems, internal organs, and backbones. It's arguably the most important event to ever happen, yet no one can explain it. The rapid divergence has baffled generations of scientists. There's no settled answer, but one theory proposed by Australian geoscientist Graham Logan has gained more acceptance. According to him, the incredible beauty of life exists from its most disgusting elements. Before the Cambrian explosion, the oceans were full of carbon, but void of oxygen. Any oxygen photosynthesizing plankton produced was quickly offset by the slower sinking carbon. The chain was finally broken with the rise of multicellular organisms. When multicellular organisms ate the bacteria, they produced the waste into carbon-rich feces. As the carbon fell to the ocean floor, the oxygen levels rose. Oxygen threw the ecological gates open. Animals finally had a chance to grow and take form. So if you ever feel like your life is pretty crappy, take solace in knowing it's always been that way. And that is the top 10 bathroom breaks that changed the world. How about that? All right, you guys. Well. Again, if you're tuning in and you were hoping for coverage of the Artemis moon launch today, it has been scrubbed, and hopefully they'll try again September 2nd, just afternoon. But I'm going to hit you with some shameless plugs and let you get on with the rest of your Monday. Of course, go and check out the Jams and Cocktails live podcast this Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Right here, wherever you're watching this, it'll show up in the same place. So come on back. It's a special one. We have the Pocky One Chip Challenge, the 2022 edition. They just released it. It's hotter, and it turns your tongue blue. So that's exciting stuff. We're going to have a good time doing that. Last time we did it, it was just me. Now it's the whole crew that'll be taking the challenge. And we're doing something unique. If you're interested in doing the challenge, go out and get your chip. I believe you can get it at stores. You can also order it on Amazon. I put a post out, but I'll do it again. Get your chip. Let me know that you got it and you want to participate, and I'll send you a link to a Zoom meeting, which will be part of our show. So you'll be on the air with us taking the One Chip Challenge, and I'll be able to pop over and show everybody your expressions, and even pick some of you out to interview post chip, and we'll see how long we can go without taking a drink after eating that chip. And we're going to do it very early on in the show, so we have to try to get through the whole show without taking a sip of anything while this chip burns us from the inside out. So it's going to be a great time. I'm very excited. It'll be a fun show this Wednesday night, Jams and Cocktails podcast, 8 p.m. We're doing it live. Shout out to our friends and partners at Code Rum, the Sneaky Tiki in downtown Stewart, Hop Life Brewing Company, and, of course, Paul from the Drums and Rums podcast, and the biggest happy hour and a half hour podcast dropping on Tuesdays, and his live stream on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Be sure to check out all that he has to offer. I have a show today, weather permitting, I suppose. It looks a little weird out there. But I will be at Blue Point Bar and Grill, home of the delicious fried hot dog, bacon-wrapped fried hot dog, right? But yeah, come on out. It's right on the inlet. It's lovely, or the intercoastal, and it's a lovely spot. Depending on the weather, it might be a little weird today, but I'll be there at 6 p.m. tonight. We also have the Pirate and Parrot Heads cruise coming up in January. Something put together by Johnny Ringo from the Code Rum Company and myself. And that is, let me pull it up here. That is in January 13th through the 15th. And it's sailing out of the Port of Palm Beach, and it's aboard the Margaritaville at Sea. And so, yes, it's the inaugural cruise. We put a lot of time and effort into it. Award-winning singer-songwriter Jesse Rice is our featured performer on that. And I'll put a link. Actually, if you go to our Facebook page and our events page, you'll see the event there. Check it out. Come and sail with us. It's going to be a good time. No doubt. Next year. Also, Mel Fisher Days is coming up really soon. In fact, it's coming up this weekend. Just at the end of this week, down in Key West, Florida, the 400th commemoration of the sinking of the Etosha is being held at Mel Fisher Days, Friday through Tuesday, the 2nd through the 6th, at multiple Key West locations. Of course, it honors the legacy of the late shipwrecked Salver Mel Fisher, as well as the Etosha and other vessels from Spain's 1622 fleet that were lost in the Straits. And to date, Mel Fisher Days has raised nearly $175,000 for charities devoted to children and their health and well-being. So if you're down in Key West this weekend, be sure to pop around and check out all the events going on for Mel Fisher Days. You can, of course, find more information out at melfisher.com. And that does it, I think, for my shameless plugs. We'll have some more shameless plugs coming in the coming days and weeks, perhaps. But thank you so much for joining me here on Jams and Coffee this morning. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get down on a space launch today, but we'll try again next time for that historic launch of the Artemis 1 rocket. At any rate, whatever you do today, make sure it's a good one. Be kind to others around you if possible. Drink some water and enjoy your Monday, you guys. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. right here, Jams and Coffee. Ta-ta for now.
Tune in again tomorrow morning for the latest local buzz, national headlines, music news, and more on JNC in the Morning, right here on Facebook and YouTube.